all of you, you're in your and Katie described what she wanted me to talk about, and it brings me back to a seminar I did a few years ago, which was called Legislate, Don't Litigate. And in those days, I was someone who was in court every day. I had the privilege of trying 136 juries to verdict. So I've been a popular trial lawyer at one point in my life, but I don't go to court anymore. I only, as a county commissioner, have to come up with ideas to fund our court system, keep it going. But I spend a lot of time with the elective bodies trying to figure out how do we do legislation to solve problems. Now, there's a mantra that I use, and it's a mantra that's helped me in terms of practicing law when I was trying cases or when I'm doing things with legislative bodies, and it is that you first have to educate people about the subject matter that you now are there representing somebody on. The second thing is you have to advocate for a position, for something that you want done. And the third, and this is often the most important, whatever you're advocating for, better solve a problem. Because just advocating for advocating's sake doesn't create the solutions that people are looking for. Now, every issue that you're dealing with this summer, I'm sure in all of the various places you're working, are all issues that have a constitutional and a legislative basis. When I was first week of law school at Georgetown, they invited us into a lecture, and the guy giving the lecture was William O. Douglas. And what I remember 45 years later from that lecture was that constitutions are extremely important, and don't treat them like your statute book. That's why you don't amend them very often. And statutes amend as often as is necessary to get fairness to the people. So one of the things that I'd like to remind all of you is that, be it revenue issues like income tax, be it pension issues, be it transportation and infrastructure issues, social service issues, public safety issues, environment and energy issues, art and culture issues, economic development issues, education issues, all of those have a basis in statute. And they all relate back to a right that's guaranteed somewhere by either the United States Constitution or our state constitution. Now, if you're here in Illinois and you haven't followed all this, you're wondering what kind of state is it that we haven't had a budget for over a year, and how do political leaders get themselves into these plunders? You know, I joke with people, I'm joking on the square, as a friend of mine says, that as a Cook County Commissioner, I represent 350,000 people, and we are the best performing large government in Illinois. You know, we represent 5.25 million people. Based upon our budgets and our size and our functionality, we are the 19th largest government in the United States. But nobody knows about us, and nobody really cares that we're functioning well, because they're all worried about the state of Illinois and the city of Chicago, which are not functioning very well. What I'd like to just talk about is a little bit of the background and then go into specific issues. I believe that, and this is lawyers, you may enjoy this, that what's happening in Illinois right now is a crisis in the separation of powers. The crisis is caused by electing our first MBA governor, our first governor who has neither a legal background nor a background in government itself. So he comes to this with different ideas. He thinks in metric terms. He doesn't think in traditional governmental terms. And there are 3 documents I carry around. I'm carrying the lighter versions of them today because I've gone to the Cubs game afterwards and I didn't want to have to take the bigger things through security. So the first is the governor's turnaround agenda, which is a fascinating document, except it doesn't have anything to do with being governor. It has to do with all kind of other things, and it doesn't impact directly the budget of the state. It deals with economic competitiveness, whatever that means. It talks about property tax freezes. Interestingly, the state government doesn't collect a dime from property taxes. It doesn't deal with revenue and operations of the state government. Even if it were to totally pass, the impact on this on the state budget is probably negligible. The biggest being if there were worker comp changes that maybe in 5 years might have some impact on our budget. But so we have a governor who believes that these metrics are the metrics that he was elected to put forth. We have a General Assembly who is used to dealing with governors who use their power in a variety of different ways. So a year ago, May, the General Assembly did pass a budget for everything, but it was $5 billion out of whack. But they've done that in the past, and what they expected was a governor to use his mandatory veto pen to reduce numbers and keep the state running. Instead, this governor said, well, if I don't get this, I'm vetoing all of that. For his own sake, the only appropriation bill he didn't veto was the K-12 bill, and we'll come back to that in a second. But the General Assembly in this last year has been trying to figure out, all right, he's not acting the way we expect him to, and the separation of powers aren't working because he's not acting like we want him to. So they did a little thing which was to tweak him, but interestingly enough, he signed it. They passed a bill that requires separation of powers to be taught as a civics course to every graduating high school kid in the future. I guess the idea is that one of them might be governor someday, and they want him to make sure that he understands or she understands what it means. So when you've got those two branches of government not intersecting with each other very well, then the third branch of government becomes the most important. And I think that we've seen a remarkable change in the role of the Illinois courts in this last year and a half. Now, the Illinois courts, you think of those justices in kind of a monastery setting in Springfield and their opinions, or you think of the U.S. Supreme Court, how do they send messages? I'm always intrigued by watching John Roberts because he sends more messages than I think any Chief Justice in the history of the United States. Example, when he took the lead on saving Obamacare, I believe what he was doing is saving the future history of his court, the Roberts Court, just as prior courts, the Chief Justice is the one we think of in those courts. Well, so the first bill that came up for a decision while Governor Rauner was in office, and one that he had spoken that they should go one way on, and before the opinion, he even said the Supreme Court of this state is corrupt. But then he added, but it's not as corrupt as the Illinois Appellate Court. And I've been intrigued that most MBAs have no idea we have an intermediate court, but the fact that he thought the Illinois Appellate Court was more corrupt, at least he acknowledged they existed. So the Supreme Court needed to send him a message, okay? The message came in I believe, in the pension ruling. Now, Governor Rauner had a relationship with only one of the Illinois Supreme Court justices, Justice Carmeier. So who did the other 6 justices ask to write a unanimous opinion to send a message? Justice Carmeier, to explain to the governor that their power is absolute when it comes to issues that get before them. And so what we've got are these 3 branches of governments that are just kind of dancing around each other. Now, Illinois has been without a budget for 1 whole year, and on July 1st, we'll start the 2nd year. Yet, we're clearly functioning. So there are a series of questions that you probably are asking as you look at projects and things that you're working on. The first is, does Illinois ever run out of money? What do you think the answer to that is? Anybody have an idea? Okay, the lady not shaking her head back. When does it run out of money? It never, go ahead.
I kind of stole the answer from me. They always have borrowing authority, so the market borrowing, but they never really do.
Well, that's true, but I'm actually just talking about cash flow. Illinois never runs out of money because every day that you buy something, there's a sales tax. Every day you get a paycheck, there's withholding. Illinois is getting money in. Our problem is that we don't have authority to spend a lot of money. In fact, right now, Illinois is building up sums of money because of lack of appropriations to spend it. So Illinois never runs out of money. But does that mean that you're balanced? There's two kinds of balancing when you're dealing with financial issues. The first is your operational budget. If we say we have $32 billion in revenue and we have $37 billion in expenditures, then we're out of balance. But if our $32 billion in revenue involves our paying down on extended debt, some of it borrowed, but most of that gets taken care of because we deal primarily in revenue bonds, so that there's actually direct money that goes to pay those bonds. But what we've got is vendors who are providing service. Those vendors, it's the controller's responsibility to figure out how to spend the cash that we have. And so she's not paying those vendors. And we've gone from about $5 billion behind in payments when the governor came into office to now around $11 billion, and they think we'll get to $12 billion by July 1st. And that means we're just pushing out all of these vendors. Now, interesting that there's a little side business going on in Illinois. There are people out there who have a lot of cash, and interest on cash isn't great right now, but Illinois pays interest on debt owed, and they're writing those checks, oddly enough, because they're mandated in the statutes that created them. So we have rich people buying the debt of social service agencies. So many of the clients that you're dealing with who are owed money from the state and are trying to figure out how to keep going, some of them have been able to keep going by selling their debt to third parties. They're paying them 60, 70 cents on the dollar. And when Illinois does catch up, they're going to make a huge amount of money. But the people who need those services are in a situation where they need cash flow. We've seen things like Lutheran Social Services cut down programs because they just ran out of cash flow. They borrowed everything they could, because in a social service agency, what's the biggest expenditure?
Labor.
It's the labor. It's the salary of the people. And that's the one vendor you can't say, well, I'll pay you in 9 months, because those people need their pay right now. So what we have is a state that can continue to function because we're not paying vendors. We also have court orders. There are some fascinating court orders that have been issued. These are judges, if you want to talk about activism on the judiciary, some of the court orders that are out there that are ordering the state of Illinois to pay things are like that. We have a court order in Cook County that orders the state to pay all judicial function expenditures. I don't know what judicial function expenditures really means, but so far they've been paying a lot of things. We're having a debate over our hearing officers who are hearing child support cases, part of a judicial function, okay? And I don't know exactly how that's going to play out, but that's actually going on this week and next as people are looking to see if they can modify that order. We have a court order from St. Clair County down south that orders all state employees to be paid, okay? No appropriation, but all are to be paid. Now, the Illinois Supreme Court 2 months ago in a decision said if there's no formal appropriation, the courts don't have the power to order payment. So everybody's been waiting. Will the Attorney General let the trial judge in St. Clair County know that the Supreme Court said without an appropriation you can't pay all the state workers? Well, the interesting thing is the judge seems to be away a lot. The file doesn't seem to be in the clerk's office. He keeps it personally in his desk. And he hasn't had time to even consult with the Attorney General to see what happened in that case. And the Attorney General seems to not have the energy to get a brief to just inform the judge that maybe he needs to relook at his order. So I think that order is going to stay in place for a while. We have a number of consent decrees, primarily coming out of the federal building, which is over there, right? The consent decrees are based upon good work, primarily done up this place place by the Schreiber Center. We have anybody working at the Schreiber Center who's in the room here? The Schreiber Center has gone in to protect functionality and the level of services that people get under programs that have federal dollars. And those consent decrees put the state on a promise to be enforced by a court that level services will exist. So therefore, those services are being paid. Believe it or not, we also have appropriations that have been signed by the governor. The one I mentioned earlier, K-12, we don't know if he did that on purpose or he did it by accident, but it is clear that signing that has made it possible for the state of Illinois to operate. And I want you to think about this. We've had this year where all kinds of services are being cut. Our state universities, all in jeopardy, no MAP payments. That hasn't precipitated a crisis that causes everybody to say, well, we better resolve it. All the social service agencies that are providing health care, that are, except for those under Medicaid, because Medicaid is one of those consent decrees that keeps payment coming. Those social service agencies haven't generated this problem. So we've got K-12. By signing that appropriation, the governor guaranteed that every school district in Illinois last August had enough money to open. Now, we don't have an appropriation on his desk for K-12 for next year, so after July 1st, we have a problem. And I'm one of those who believe that if there is no K-12 appropriation, that will resolve the differences. Because imagine a state, if next August, no school district opens except for the very wealthiest, who have sometimes 3 years worth of reserved cash. Because they're rich communities, they tax at a high level, and they're conscious of their spending. Now, they're also the schools that are spending close to $29,000 per student versus some of the areas of Illinois where we're spending $600 per student. I mean, so these are, if you have that situation where those are the only school districts running, we will have a problem. And that's what's really the heart of where we are today, because the Chicago legislators are saying the current school aid formula doesn't work, so before we give you an appropriation bill, we want to change the formula to give Chicago what it should be getting all along. But nobody can come to that agreement, and if we can't get that agreement, then we're not going to pass K-12, so Governor, you're going to have a big problem in August. And I think we're going to see that that'll happen. Now, they did pass other appropriation bills, and I want you to just think about these other appropriation bills and what pressured them to do it. They passed an appropriation bill to guarantee that lottery winners got paid. What caused that? Lottery winners going on TV complaining that I didn't get my payout. People who weren't getting home health care going on TV didn't get it, but lottery winners. Because how could Illinois, these people won? So we passed a number of bills that are that specialized. We have some that pay the motor fuel tax to the local governments. We have some that pay the local government distribution fund, which comes off the income tax to the local governments. They were all done because people were putting pressure on. But it was interesting, the universities and the students who were getting denied their MAP grants, or were getting MAP grants, but we're going to have to eventually pay them back when to the universities that fronted the money. That didn't cause people to want to do anything. And so now what do we have in Illinois? We have people who are having little task forces. And from your perspectives as potential lawyers and advocates for poor people, you need to watch all these little groupings that are trying to come up with budget deals on little pieces of the overall budget. I've described this as it's groups that are making a jigsaw puzzle piece, and when they finish, they're going to go out and hope that they were working on the same puzzle as the people in the other groups, because otherwise it's not going to fit together. And at this point, it almost seems like these groups are there to just keep spreading it out so that we're not in a position to come up with a budget. In the meantime, where are people going to try to get relief? They're going to the courts. And that's the one thing that you as lawyers can do that other advocates can't do. You can get them into the court and get judges to use their equitable powers to come up with solutions. Remember, what do? You educate, you advocate, and you solve a problem. When you're asking a judge to use equitable powers that are often a little bit on the edge, you've got to give them a problem that's being solved, and be it funding healthcare, funding services for college kids, funding grade school services. Those are the things that judges will get excited about. Now, when clients come to any lawyer, the client is always in a crisis. There are no clients who come to you because they're feeling happy. Going to see their lawyer is worse than going to see their dentist. And when you're looking at the not-for-profit world that many of you are going to be representing, these are people who do not have a lot of resources. They do not have a lot of reserves. And so when their crisis comes to you, you've got to help them analyze what caused the crisis, where is there a solution to this crisis, and how do we get any kind of other grassroots support to get voices heard on the crisis. And I think that hopefully you're learning some of those skills this summer in the jobs that you're having. But the thing that I think you need to understand is, as lawyers, we are not the client. And sometimes lawyers come to identify with the client. It is extremely important for you not to become the client, but to have enough objectivity to be able to argue for the client without getting drawn into the emotion that may be on the client's side. Because when all else fails, you may be the only clear-thinking person in a negotiation. You may be the only person who is trying to understand, away from the emotional side of this, what is the solution? How do I advocate to get to that solution? And how do I make sure that both sides leave this room with a willingness to continue to work on this problem? Today there is a demonstration going on around the city. I know you saw them. There are a lot of people wearing red T-shirts with Chicago Teachers Union. In my law practice, I'm a convention counsel for the Chicago Teachers Union, and I do a lot of their legislative work. The reason that the teachers are out there today is because their government is failing them, okay? Now, the reason I'm not out there is because they need me and the other lawyers who are representing them to figure out when the mayor says, "Uncle, let's go into a room," and then let's sit down and try to, one, get a contract, two, come up with a funding solution, and three, make sure that all of that can be sold to the governor of the state and the legislature of the state. As lawyers, other than wearing cardinal shirts on a Cubs town, I never get involved in the protest side of this, unless I've been asked to be there to ensure when someone gets arrested that I can go get them bail, okay? And I think that one of the things that when the world seems to be totally without normal checks and balances, it's very easy to kind of shift over and identify more with your client and less with your profession. So what I want to do is say to you that as lawyers, we are in a position where we can change society. Being a lawyer is the best thing I ever did. I hope it becomes the best thing that you ever did. And no matter what the setting is, if you're the only lawyer in the room, you've got some clout. But if there are two lawyers, and maybe you can get them to argue the other side, you can get a better situation because you create the tension that leads to solution. Okay. Now, one of the other things, and I gave you a handout. This is a handout I use in a lot of presentations. The first handout is all of the various ways that a bill becomes a law in Illinois. And I just ask you to look at it. It's more of a comical relief thing. But what it is why we study the rules of procedure, why we study Robert's rules for how to conduct meetings. It's the fact that you as lawyers need to be the ones who know these things, be able to help others who are not going to be very sophisticated figure out how to do it. On the back side, I've put 9 points to keep in mind when contacting a legislator. And they're real simple rules, but again, I want you to remind yourself that as the lawyer, you may sometimes have to help discipline your client to stay within the rules because they are emotionally involved. It happens all the time in court. You know, you'll go to court with a client who seems fine, but when they get in front of the judge or they get in front of the jury, they lose it all. And it doesn't help, especially when the solution may be at hand under the rule of law that you're there to deal with. What I'd like to do now is just stop and take questions and talk about interactions as a lawyer with their clients, with the legislature, with the courts, and what is the best way to accomplish really social change, which is what you want to do as a lawyer. You know, if you're a lawyer who, when you're 70 years old, wants to be referred to as a civil rights lawyer, you want to be able to show that you changed for the better the civil rights of people. If you're a consumer lawyer, you want to be able to say you changed consumer law for the better. If you're an environmental lawyer, you want to be able to say that you somehow changed the environment for the better. So it's looking at those kind of things. So I'll stop there and ask you for questions. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I have one. I just wanted to thank you for your presentation. You see, when you outlined what the governor was doing, I think that was interesting to me, and I took equities and so forth. The whole thing, the governor is pushing court reform, and that seems that as a lawyer, that impacts me. It really bothers me. It seems like he's more interested in doing what's best for his rich friends, as opposed to what's really going to serve the people of Illinois.
Well, you raise an interesting issue that every elected official has. Who do you represent? You represent your constituency. But who's your constituency? Is it the last time I ran, I got 76% of the vote. So do I represent the 76% who thought I was the person they wanted to have on the county board? Or do I represent the 24% who weren't quite sure who I am? The answer is you got to try to represent all of them. And I find the governor to be somebody who is sincere. I find him to be a very difficult personality and to deal with. So I guess I'll defend him on, I don't think he's just defending his rich friends. I think he really believes in his mind that the metrics that he wants to follow, including changes to tort reform, are metrics that makes society better. You know, as long as you've got elected officials who are trying to do what's right, it's easy to deal with them. If they're not trying to do what's right, if they're doing something that's crooked or wrong, then we all have a problem, and we'll never resolve the issues. But you know, I do take the governor at his word that he believes that these things he's pushing are important. But since I don't see how they lead to a better state from a revenue and operational point of view, I keep saying, why this? Why now? But you know, I'm not him, and he only made $63 million last year. One of the interesting sidelights, you know, he's refusing a salary as governor, and because of the strangeness in the law, you got to take $1, so he's getting $1 a year. Senator Cullerton, the president of the Senate, points out that because of the reduction in the income tax rate that the governor pushed through, with his income from last year, he made or saved $750,000 in state income tax. So he's either the lowest paid governor we've ever had, or he's the highest paid governor we've ever had, if you want to look at things from that perspective. But I do trust that he's trying to do this for the right reason. Yes, Kate.
Yeah, so in our, as I mentioned, Larry briefs us occasionally for legal aid committee meetings that we have monthly here in the city, the Chicago Bar Association, the Chicago Bar Foundation. And one of the questions that is often asked in earnest by the executive directors of many of your organizations is, how do we appeal in this budget impasse to the legislatures and the governor on behalf of our clients for these really critical services that they're receiving? And I wondered if you could share that so that these folks can hear that as well.
Well, the first thing for lawyers to do is to figure out, is there a judicial solution? Because unfortunately, the impasse is causing paralysis in the General Assembly to pass bills that, one, would get to the governor that he wouldn't veto, and two, that they'd have enough votes to override those bills. The governor, by the way, has a very enviable record. He has vetoed 46 bills and only been overridden on 2. One he agreed to be overridden on, which was the heroin task force bill, and he wanted to make changes, and he was convinced he was wrong, and so he said, okay, override me. The second was one that just happened 3 weeks ago, which was a police and fire pension bill that the mayor had, and 3 Republicans voted for very, very different reasons with the Democrats to have enough in the House to do the override. So the governor's record has been pretty good on his controlling things. I think that everybody needs to start off in this climate not thinking about how do I petition the General Assembly, because when you go down there and you see all the groups, they're all asking for the same thing. They're asking for an appropriation to keep the program, and these are all important life-saving programs. And at this point, I don't see that we're going to have an appropriation in a budget that can resolve it. So I think the first issue is, how do we educate the courts? How do we advocate for a solution in the courts? And how do we solve a problem? If you find you don't fit into that, and occasionally you don't, then you got to be a little more creative. I'll give you an example. The state owes the county on child support somewhere around $22 million. And, some people focus on the fact that that money funds 177 county workers in the sheriff's office, the state's attorney's office, clerk of the court's office, and the circuit court judge's office. But I say, I don't care about 177 county workers unless we need them to do the work. What I care about is there are 280,000 children who get their child support through this program of the non-custodial parent paying to the court and the court paying to the custodial parent. And if those children's revenue is disrupted, they could be homeless very quickly. They could not have enough clothes, not have enough food. And so there's a crisis there. And we're getting nowhere in getting an appropriation. I mean, we were just another social service. So I passed a resolution at the county board to send this to federal court to a judge who had one of the consent decrees. Fortunately, it was the Schreiber Center was on the other side, and they were open to this. And what we tried to do is to get the judge to let us intervene and to broaden the scope of the consent decree that it included the child support services. Well, the judge turned us down, but he created enough conversation that the state did figure out a way to pay us, and the reduced amount. But the fact is that they didn't want 280,000 kids having bigger poverty issues than they currently have. It's not quite as focused as not having schools open, but it could have precipitated in at least this community something. So what I think you've got to be able to do with your clients is figure out, one, what are the resources they possess. For most of them, the greatest assets they have are membership, are people who are fairly articulate and who understand the need for this. Then what you've got to help them do is formulate that into an educational and an advocacy program that either leads you to court or with them leads them back to the legislators, following those 9 principles of not insulting the legislators, but working to get things done. Now, one of the problems that we have is that former Governor Quinn is the only person to date who's been successful in using a referendum to amend the Illinois Constitution. His referendum in 1982 cut the size of the Illinois House from 177 members to 118. But Illinois had a very progressive provision that allowed for 3-member representation, 2 from a majority party and 1 either independent or another party. And what that did is that gave us Republicans who represented people in the General Assembly from Chicago. And it gave us Democrats in downstate areas that are very Republican to represent those people. And that caused dialogue to happen. Unfortunately, today we don't have much of that dialogue. Chicago is represented in the General Assembly by 1 Republican who is out by O'Hare Field, Michael Collins. The nearest Republican senator to Chicago is Palatine. Think about that. We created regional divides. So one of the things that I've said is you've got to find allies. And so if your client's asset are their people and their issues, there's got to be similar people with similar issues that are in Palatine. So that when they go, they're not coming as a Chicago group to go talk to the senator from Palatine, who happens to be Matt Murphy, who's a very good lawyer and a very decent human being, but they're people from Palatine with Chicago people, because to move this discussion, we have to have dialogue between the 2 sides. So I think my advice to you is always analyze what your client's needs are, what their assets are in terms of their resources, and then help them strategize a way to do it. But remember, our job as lawyers is not to take their role as activists. Our job as lawyers is to create the situation where their activism can be better received. Last week I went out with a client to talk to the city manager of Joliet. My role in that meeting was to create a dialogue so that my client could make the petition to Joliet to get them to do what we felt was necessary for the public good. Does that help? Any other questions?
Grown people who are just not pushing, who aren't, it seems like it's like there's actual people who are losing jobs, losing a lot of these services, and you have politicians who aren't really, moving forward in anything. And they've had a year now to compromise and to, I don't know if it's my lack of understanding of what actually goes on behind closed doors and how these things work, but it just doesn't make sense why it's been a year and people just have to suffer for it.
Well, the suffering is clearly the hardest part to understand. But you know what? I don't think that many of our political leaders understand the suffering. They on paper, they understand some people don't have justice. But most of them aren't confronted by people who are in trouble. The whole concept of this governor, I was asked at a forum that I did with mental health providers, do you think the governor sleeps well at night? I think he sleeps very well at night because
9 houses or something.
Well, he's got 9 houses. He might not sleep well if he's got to move house to house. But, technically, I guess I'm his county commissioner because the house he votes from is in Winnetka, which is in my district. But the governor's stated purpose is reducing the size of government. I think he really wants to close 2 state universities. He thinks we have too many state universities. I've heard him say that in Indiana, and a third of his staff came from people who were involved in Indiana government when Mitch Daniels was the governor of Indiana, that there are only 16 social service providers in the entire state of Indiana. We have almost 300 in Illinois. So what the governor, I think, is actually somewhat enjoying is that some of the smaller social service agencies are folding their tents because that's reducing the number of people they'll have to eventually deal with. Now, I don't know how he deals with something like Lutheran Social Services, which is one of the bigger players, reducing. But, the one thing you'll find in court is that it's hard to get adults to be adults. And that's why I always stress that the role of the lawyer is to not lose our head in this discussion, but to try to always keep focusing. The biggest difference between the courts and the legislature is that the courts, the oath of office the judicial officer takes, is that he or she will be fair and impartial. Okay? The oath of office you take to be a legislator is that you'll uphold the Constitution, but you don't have to be fair and impartial. In fact, if your belief is that I'm representing the constituents who want me to do X, Y, and Z, you can be biased. And that becomes problematic in dealing with them. And that's why you've got to always try to bring the conversation to some kind of an adult level. And unfortunately, it doesn't always happen. Just as we have fistfights in court, sometimes we have fistfights in the legislature. Yes, go ahead.
Have you had moments of like personal conflict between something that you've been asked to advocate for that kind of opposes your own beliefs?
Well, that's the age-old dilemma. In my public defender days, I used to tell people I'm not in favor of murder, but I do defend people accused of murder. You know, for the most part, I don't put myself in situations. Those clients, first of all, don't hire me, or I don't get involved in those kind of issues in my elected side. I think that even in the not-for-profit world, though, you're a check and a balance. You know, we've got a code of ethics that we're supposed to follow. Sometimes, even some of the best not-for-profits are so anxious that they can skirt the issues. Today's paper shows that what was 2 years ago one of the largest Hispanic not-for-profits in Illinois, UNO, agreed to pay some amount with the SEC because, and my guess is they went through a lot of change in lawyers at the various times. So my guess is that there were things that the not-for-profit wanted to do that various lawyers decided they didn't want to do. I think you always have to protect your own values, and you have to stand up for things. You know, remember, my concept of the lawyer is that you're always the adult in the room and always trying to generate conversation. If your side wants to be cheating, you're not going to cause that kind of conversation that you're supposed to do. So you shouldn't be in that situation. If you can't change your client's mind, then I think you'll go get a different client. In the summer positions you're in, have you all gone through all kind of ethics training and dealing with the unique circumstances of clients that the organizations you're working for deal with? Yes, no? Have you done kind of ethics stuff?
No, that would be on the individual agency level.
You know, the one thing that lawyers sometimes forget is that we do have an ethical standard, you know, and we're responsible for maintaining that. One of the things in Springfield, there are a lot of lobbyists who are not lawyers, and someone will ask me, well, why should I have a lawyer do my lobbying when I could get somebody who can, you know, try and fix it some other way? My general feeling is you want somebody who's got an ethical standard and who, if they cross the line, there's somebody who can discipline them, rather than being always out there worrying about what's being done in my name or how do we resolve these issues. You know, going back to what her point earlier, to resolve things. Part of it is they think differently than we do. You know, right now, I think that we have this president of the Senate who wants short-term solutions. And I've known Senator Cullerton for a long time. He tried his first jury with me in the public defender's office a long time ago. But he's always been very practical. And he has the ability to be practical because while he has 39 senators, which is the largest one-party caucus in the United States other than Hawaii. In Hawaii, there are 25 senators, 24 are Democrats. One is a Republican, which is an interesting situation. But so he only has probably 3 of his senators in this next election cycle in November who are going to have serious elections, and I think all 3 are probably going to be safe, and he may pick up a seat from the Republicans. So he wants an immediate solution. Speaker Madigan is thinking long term, and he's thinking, I need to win. I have 71 seats. As many of you know the story, he was about to override the governor on an important bill, and one of his members went to the U.S. Open tennis tournament in New York and refused to come back, and so he didn't have his 71 votes. He has just 71 votes, what's necessary to override a veto. And he now believes he has to pick up at least 4 more seats. The person, by the way, who went to the U.S. Open was defeated in the primaries last March. A lot of money. The governor ended up supporting that guy with like almost $4 million. And the Democrats spent about $2 million. So $6 million for one legislative seat. Okay? It's just beyond belief. So the speaker says, well, we'll resolve all this after November. That the state seems to be going along well with the court orders, the consent decrees. You know, if we need to tweak something, make sure the lottery winners, because lo and behold, on July 1, if you win the lottery, we don't have authority to pay you, okay? Because the bill that got signed runs out on June 30th. So maybe they'll come back to protect those lottery winners. You know? But I think that the concept of, you know, the timelines here and the adults in the room, everybody's got a different perspective. The governor may be thinking 2018 when he's up again. Yes.
There's a week left. Do you have any kind of projections on what might or might not happen?
Well, they were supposed to be in continuous session. The Senate has never set a date to come back. The speaker said they come back every Wednesday. Today's a Wednesday. They've canceled every Wednesday on the Tuesday before. So they're scheduled, the House is scheduled to be in next Wednesday. But my guess is they probably won't. And, you know, the interesting, the public perception, you know, all these pollsters that are out there, it doesn't seem to make that much of a difference on people. Those who believe it's Speaker Madigan's fault are never going to change their mind, and those who think it's the governor's fault are never going to change their mind. But, you know, the election, since the governor is not up for election this time, the electorate are going to be dealing with individual legislators to take their frustration out. But the vast majority of them are unopposed. And so we're really down to about 13 races. And remember, those races, where you live becomes the key. In Evanston, where I live, my representative is Laura Klein. For years, it was Robin Gable. Well, Robin has a Republican opponent who's a very attractive candidate to the Republicans because she's a lawyer, she's articulate, has been the mayor of her hometown of Winnetka. But the map is drawn as a 25% Republican map. Okay, so she's not going to win, but Robin Gable is all nervous about this race. So I was with our mayor, and Robin said, I need both of you to vote for me. And I said, Robin, I can't do that. And the mayor said, well, I'll do it. And I said, but if you do it, Mayor, it'll be illegal because you live in Laura Fine's district, because she's a neighbor of mine. But Robin had forgotten that we weren't her constituents. So I think that what the people in this election, the backlash is not going to really happen in the legislature. If Madigan doesn't get to 75, that may cause them to try to do something. But without the governor being on the ballot, without Madigan being on the ballot, I think we're stuck. Now, remember I told you don't amend your Constitution too often, was what William O. Douglas told us. Looks like we'll have 2 constitutional amendments on the ballot. One that the legislature put there. They didn't put one on dealing with merit selection of judges. They didn't put one there on revenue. They didn't put one there on funding education. But they did put one that says all money generated from motor fuel tax has to go to roads and transportation. So that one's on. And then the group that wants to have a fair map, which is what their phrase is, which is a panel of independent people other than the legislature who would draw the next map, I think will be on, and that'll be an interesting battle. But right now it's in the courts because the Illinois Constitution says if the legislature doesn't put it on, the only article that by referendum you can amend is the legislative article, and it has to go to the function and purpose of the legislature. So there have been some court decisions in the past that redistricting doesn't deal with the function and purpose of the legislature. Reducing the numbers might, but so the fair map will be out there, and it'll be interesting to watch. That's 2 referendums that are statewide referendums to see if the public jumps at it.
Do you have any suggestions on ways that we can stay informed as legal advocates and with the major policy issues?
Well, one of the things that when you do become lawyers are, because I think both the State Bar and the Chicago Bar and Chicago Council of Lawyers, all of those larger bar associations, I mean, are doing policy work and putting out information, and it's the easiest way, I think, for lawyers to keep in touch. I think, like things like the Decalogue Society, which is a society of Jewish lawyers or gay and lesbian bar, those bar associations have very significant purposes and missions, but they're not as much into the broader education unless something, comes up that hits on their field. The Puerto Rican Bar Association, Mexican American Bar Association, all of those are good organizations, but I think the bigger bars have the ability to keep you informed. The other thing is, and I heard you say earlier, networking. I mean, learning what's going on each of you, following what cases each of your employers are filing, trying to understand what policy issues they feel that are important and are the next policy issues, I think become important. I mean, we're talking about how much lead is in this bottle, okay? Well, nobody knows, how much lead is everywhere. As you forget the name of somebody you see, blame it on lead, I guess, is going to be the picture. But the most important thing is, these are the kind of issues that lawyers should be able to help figure out some solutions to. And I'm a firm believer that government's function is to spend money to keep the economy going. So I think that when we have the ability to have dollars that government can spend in stimulus, that's what's better for society. I'm writing down today on the LA. Years ago, I represented the motormen and conductors and the ticket takers and the CTA. We no longer have ticket takers. We no longer have conductors. We have one-person trains. Those are actually thousands of jobs that government should, I think, be giving to people as starter jobs to get them. But we keep cutting back because we're going to be efficient. Government's job is to put money into the economy and to get people working. And I think that unfortunately we don't do enough of that. We're always trying to cut corners, and the more people that are working, the fewer problems they're going to have. Jobs, healthcare, housing, education. Those are the issues you're all going to deal with in your job. Those are the 4 issues that if people have them, their life is better. All right, any other questions? Other than that, it's 1 o'clock and I know you all want to go back to work. Thank you for having me here. I don't know, sometimes I wander around and talking about these things, but let me just say, best decision I made in my life was to become a lawyer, and I hope it becomes the best decision for you to make. Thank you.